Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and today I'm wearing my go-to-town clothes. But that's not what I'm about to talk about here today. What I'm about to talk about is day length and why it matters. Now, first of all, what is day length? Well, day length is literally the amount of time between the sunrise and the sunset on any given day. And there are websites that you can use to figure that out. You can put in your information and it will tell you when your sun rises and when your sun sets and how many days, how many hours of sunlight there is. Now, why does that matter? Well, if you've ever read an article about, say, growing tomatoes or growing lettuce or something like that, it'll usually say when you're planting these plants, they like this many hours of sunlight as a minimum. Sunlight is not as universal as people would like to think. Sunlight at 7,000 feet above sea level in Flagstaff, Arizona, is going to be really different than sunlight in SoCal, California at 2 feet above sea level. And what I mean by that is you're dealing with what's in the air. There's a lot less air above you, atmosphere, in Flagstaff, Arizona than there is in SoCal, California. Now, why does that make any difference? Well, ultraviolet, basically the intensity. And where you are may also be affected by what's in the air. So in SoCal, we frequently had mist. And I'm not talking pollution, I'm talking about natural mist caused by the fact that there was an ocean right there. You see the same thing on either coast of the United States. Don't see it as often in the Gulf Coast because it's usually flat as a board, but at least in some areas. But East and West Coast, you get wave action, you get water being thrown up into the air all the time, sometimes there's serious fog and mist and all that sort of stuff. That affects how much sun is coming through. To this day, I still love it when we do get fog here because it's kind of a special thing. But we've lived other places like SoCal where there are certain times of the year where there will be fog every single morning. And sometimes it doesn't burn off until mid to late afternoon. Well, that's definitely going to affect the amount of sunlight that your plants are getting. But even ignoring that sort of information, why would you care how many hours of sunlight you have? Well, because your plants care. For instance, when we lived in Massachusetts, we used to grow cipollini onions. And they're an absolutely awesome white gourmet onion, super delicious, good for all kinds of cooking. So when we moved here, without thinking about it, I tried to grow some. And it was a fail. They were definitely onions, but they didn't bulb correctly. Why? Because cipollini onions are a long day onion. And you know what? I don't live in a long day environment. Now, believe me, when it's 102 degrees outside and that day seems really long, but that has nothing to do with it. It actually has to do with how many physical hours of sun there are here. Northern Arizona, is in what they call an intermediate day area. And there are maps, I'll see if we can find one and share it, that show long day, intermediate day, short day. And when you go to buy seeds for onions, do not assume that the onions that are being sold in your area, the seeds for instance, are correct for your area. Do a little research first. If I go to a reputable seed seller, Hoss Tools, Johnny's, I think I don't know if Burpees has it or not, but they will talk to you about long, intermediate, and short day onions. And they'll say, this is a long day, this is a short day, this is an intermediate day. Can you grow long days in an intermediate day area? I did 1 year. In fact, the first year that I grew cipollini onions here, they actually did pretty well. They weren't as large or as robust as the ones we had in Massachusetts, but they did okay. The same seed the next year failed miserably. The bulbs didn't bulb at all. It just wasn't quite right for them. So that makes it a very potluck situation. And to be honest, I like things to be as sure as possible when I'm growing a seed. So we now grow candy onions here, which are a sweet, similar to the Walla Wallas and things like that. And they're a perfect intermediate day onion. They love it here. They just love it. And it's not the only variety out there that loves it here. But do check things like that when you're growing onions. So why else would it be important? Well, say I'm starting seeds in my house and I'm planning to grow those plants to maturity in my house. How many hours do I need to have the grow lights on? Well, during the middle of the winter, and it depends on exactly where you live as to how long this period goes on, there's a thing called the Persephone period. It's based on an ancient Greek myth, Persephone having to go down into the underworld for a certain amount of time during the winter. And it goes along with the concept that during the summer, the days are long, and during the winter, the days are short. The ancient peoples were very familiar with this. They understood the solstices and all that sort of stuff. What's the longest day? What's the shortest day? What's the day where they're equinox, equal day and night? Starting in about, when I'd have to check the exact date here, but I think it's either late November or December. I think it's December here. We have a very short Persephone period in Arizona, northern Arizona. Our daylight hours drop below 10. And to be honest, the plants that you grow in your greenhouse, for instance, are not going to do much. They'll stay alive as long as you're watering them and taking care of them in any other way, but they won't grow. They'll just kind of go into like a little hibernation sort of thing. And it has nothing to do with the temperature whatsoever. It has to do with the length of the day, how much daylight they're getting. So say from I think it's about the 12th or 15th of December until about the 12th or 15th of January is our Persephone period. During that time, any vegetables that I have in the greenhouse are really not going to do much. Not any of the leafy greens for sure. So my spinach and my lettuce and even my cabbage will not do a lot during that time frame. Now, the minute that Persephone period is over in January, they hit the ground running and they are ready to go. You can see the change within a week of hitting that 10 hours per day of sunlight. You can see them just keep going. Between the fact that the sun is low on the horizon and therefore not as bright, and the fact that the day is shorter, those plants are simply not going to do during the middle of the winter. And it's important to know that you're not necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just that they're kind of waiting for the day to get longer. Now, the professional growers at that point will give them extra sunlight in the form of grow lamps. You have grow lamps and you run them for an hour or two more, and that makes your plants think that they've got a long enough day and they'll just keep growing right through that. The same thing happens with chickens. And this is a very controversial topic, I know, for some people. During the middle of the winter, when the day length grows too short, the chickens will stop laying, or they will almost stop laying. They'll go from, 5 eggs a week to 1 egg a week or something like that. Or sometimes they will completely stop growing. And it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong with their feed. It doesn't mean they're too cold or too hot or too anything else. They just are not getting enough sunlight. The professional growers, the egg producers, will put a lamp in their chicken coop. Now, you don't have to put it on all night, but just a couple of hours of extra light will keep your chickens laying. Some people think this is a good idea. Some people prefer to let the chickens go through their normal dormancy stage, if you will. And how long that dormancy stage is will depend on where you live in the United States and how long a day you have to start with. What you choose to do on that topic is your decision, not mine. I don't grow chickens. But I know it's a problem for people who do grow chickens. If they want the eggs on a regular basis, then they have to do something in the wintertime to increase that egg laying if they're not getting enough. Either that or they have to preserve their eggs off season so that when they hit that spot where it's really low productivity, they've got preserved eggs and they can use those instead. Your choice. How else does the day length affect things? Okay, I mentioned before, if you're growing in your house, for instance, I could have a closet and I could start my seedlings in there. Not a problem. They actually don't even need light for the first few days. They don't need light until they pop out of the soil. All they need is it to be the correct moisture and the correct temperature. So for the first 3 to 5 days, I could have it sitting in the dark in a closet. Don't even bother turning on the grow light. But I have to be monitoring it every day because as soon as those seeds start popping up, they do need light because those leaves are the little engines that power that plant. So they're going to need the light. But how much light do you give them? Do you keep the lights on 24/7? The marijuana growers do, but most of the vegetable growers that I know of don't. Now, I haven't checked with the big greenhouses like Bonnie and stuff like that to see how long they keep theirs on. We're actually in an area where Bonnie has some of the big greenhouses. It seems like the lights are always on there, but I can't tell the difference because they don't have signs up at their facilities, which people are growing marijuana and which people are growing seedlings. And it's never been something I've been that interested in to check in. But from a perspective of somebody who's paying an electric bill or draining their batteries, if you give your plants 10 to 12 hours of light, that's plenty, and then you can turn it off. It'll be just like in the real world. I wouldn't give them less than 10 hours because you don't want them in that Persephone period. You want them having lots of energy coming into those little leaves. Because like I say, those are the engines that power that plant once the plant is up. It has a lot of energy stored in that tiny, tiny little seed, or that not so tiny little seed if we're talking about something like a bean. It still needs the energy from the sun pretty much as soon as it's up. It has the fertilizer it needs in that seed until it starts to develop true leaves. Now, once it's got true leaves, you need to fertilize it. If I'm growing in the wintertime in my greenhouse, well, if I'm growing in the summertime in my greenhouse, I don't need to put any extra light out there. Not if I'm getting at least 10 to 12 hours of light. As soon as the light that I'm getting from the sun falls below that, I need to add some extra if I want to keep it growing at a normal rate. Now, if I don't care, because there are times when you just decide, it's okay. I don't really need 8 cabbage plants right now. I'll let these kind of go a little dormant. So I might decide that maybe I want to put some light on the spinach, but I'm not going to worry about the cabbage. We'll just wait for that to do its own thing. Fine, not a problem. If you can light one piece and not light the other piece, great. It's your decision as to how much you light your plants, but you need to know that they don't need 24 hours. Could there be some specialty circumstances under which it would help? Like I say, the marijuana growers put the lights on 24/7 as far as I can tell. That's what I see in the videos. I don't know anybody personally who's doing it, but okay, I'm not growing marijuana. I've been asked if I am because I have a greenhouse, but no, there's I think, exciting things in there. There's cabbage, and there's tomatoes, and there's cantaloupe, which, by the way, has flowers on it right now, and some of them are female. There's a couple of random flowers. There's husk cherries, peppers, 3 different kinds. Yeah, 3 different kinds. All kinds of herbs. Basil, tarragon, Thai basil, big, beautiful, bushy things. It's awesome. Oh, bush beans. I need to harvest those tomorrow. Cucumbers. You know, there's all kinds of things going in there that I think are very exciting, but no marijuana. So I don't currently during the summer, or in this case the fall, provide any additional light, and I might for seedlings if I was trying to get them going once the daylight falls below 10 hours a day. But I don't see a reason to augment. Now, if I was in a environment where, say, my neighbor's house shades my greenhouse and I'm only getting 6 hours, 7 hours of sunlight, there are plants that are more tolerant of that than others. For instance, I was chatting with somebody the other day. They have a spot where nothing has done very well, and they think it's because it's too shady. And I suggested greens because, especially in the midsummer, greens are way more tolerant of heat if they get less sun. And in our environment, because we're higher altitude, we're very, very bright, intensely bright, a significant percentage of the time, the amount of light reduction along, say, a fence or a wall can be beneficial to certain types of plants. For instance, I can grow spinach and lettuce and pak choi and strawberries in the shade on the north side of the house. It's not completely shaded. It does get very bright light, especially since it's a white wall behind it. But it gives it a break from some of the intense heat. And because the sun never directly hits that white wall, it's not a situation in which the wall is actually radiating heat at night during the summer. Now in the wintertime, because the house itself stays warmer, it does provide a moderating influence to the bed along the house. That doesn't freeze nearly as early in the season as the beds that are farther out in the yard, even though they get way more sun, because the house is actually providing protection and radiating a certain amount of heat. I hope this helps. It's something I never would have thought about years ago because I didn't grow in the wintertime. I knew the thing about the fact that chickens would stop laying eggs in the middle of the winter. I never thought about whether my plants would sort of take a nap for a month or so in the middle of the winter. If you live in the north in particular, sometimes I remember going to school, especially in high school when we went to school very early. I remember going to school in the dark, and it would already sort of be dusk when I got home from school late in the afternoon, because it's a very short day situation. But in the summertime, they have really, really long days. The sun is up until 9 o'clock at night. It changes up a lot depending on where you live, where you are on the latitude. And latitude confuses some people. It's easy. If you have a globe, one of those cute ones like we had in school, here's a globe sitting there. Think of a ladder. Latitude, ladder. And the ladder has rungs on it. And the ladder's leaning up against the globe. If you've looked at a globe, it's got lines on it. Well, the rungs of that ladder are the latitude. And that shows exactly where you are on the globe. So our friends in Australia right now, we're here in the northern hemisphere, we're going into winter. In another 2 months, it'll be winter here. They're going into summer. So where fall, there's spring. So it's exactly the opposite down in Oz, as we call it, the opposite from North America. So it's really important to understand little bits and pieces like that. Anyone below the equator has got a very different schedule than we do have. We have a friend in South Africa. Hi, Jan. He's got exactly the opposite schedule that we do. So sometimes when he's asking questions, we're like, well, and then we realize, oh, that's the wrong question. It's not when he's going to get frost. It's when he's going to get warmer, because he's in the opposite season than we're in. But for everybody north of the equator, it is important to understand your latitude. The charts that are available on the internet a lot of times will talk about the latitude you're growing at and where different plants do best. So it's handy to understand that. Hope you found this interesting. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because obviously we're going to be doing a ton more. We did a monster shopping day today. We met some new friends up in Flagstaff who have been following us for a while, and we've been helping them with some of their garden issues. And we did a data dump for them today on how they can have some progress, more progress with their greenhouse. And we had a ball. I ate more food today than I've eaten in a really long time. I'm even thinking, do we want to eat dinner? But it was a lot of fun. And we got to wear clean clothes and the whole 9 yards. Good jeans. Woo! Jack got scritches and an ice cream. Oh, and leftover fish from lunch too. So he's taking a nap. So if you have questions, if you have things you don't understand about Daylength or some other aspect of growing, let us know. If we know, we'll be glad to share what we have for information. So until next time, keep brainstorming. Bye.